欢迎大家回来。下午的环节的现在开始。首先，我们请全国社保基金理事会原副理事长王忠民先生跟我们讲一下中国的养老制度建设、养老金的可持续性及政策建议。谢谢王老师，你开始吧。
好的，我是全国社保基金的王忠。
I am Wang Zhongmin, the former Vice Chairman of the National Council for Social Security Fund China. I've been in the position for 16 years, and today I would want to talk about some of the aspects of the Social Security Fund, including its sustainability, its structure, etc. I'll be talking about 5 areas. 1, some of the issues and phenomena that we see now, and I will be talking about 5 lines concerning this. The first phenomenon, I would say, is IRA, Individual Retirement Account, IRA. This structure for our Social Security Fund, I would say for the individuals, whether they are concerned about the IR accounts, whether the returns have been good, and some of the knowledge about the accounts, I think it is all insufficient. Why? Because these individuals and the individuals' retirement accounts, they do not realize, individuals do not realize the connection to their interests and the importance to their interests. For IRAs, in terms of the use of it as a tool for finance and also its connection with disposable income and its connection with insurance products, where in fact we have been promoting the use of tools for different tools. However, this third pillar of retirement for IRA had not been developing well. And a third area, if we look at the market, the securities market of China, a lot of the analysis and conclusions about the market, there is one that has met with particular consensus. That is, large-scale, long-term investments, investing into the secondary market, it is too few and too small in scale. But on the other hand, the retail investors, they are the majority and the most part of the market. And also, for the third pillar for retirement, for this particular part, how big is it in terms of scale? In the 3 pillars, what part is it in share? And looking at the universal or international proportion, IRA is about 1/3 or over or just around 1/3. And the first pillar is about 20%. And then there is a second pillar as well. For China, the third pillar, if we only take into account the market investment part, it is but 1-point-something% share. So this shows that for the third pillar in individual accounts and as a third pillar for retirement, it is lacking scale in investments. And then another point is hidden credit or loans. It is about 5 to 6 trillion, or just short of 6 trillion in total size. This is the balance. It is the same as, is this first pillar balance or is it third pillar balance? If it is first pillar balance, then under the individual account, where did all the costs and fees go? And if it is a third pillar balance, then what about the credit relationship? Did the third pillar individuals agree to the interest rates of such credit? So these are some of the questions we ask, and with these questions put together, we arrive at a certain conundrum or an issue. Now, in Chinese, these are individual accounts. But I would say for individual retirement account, in name, they seem to be the same. But on the other hand, for structure, content, and logic, they are not the same. And then, if we think of the concept of only including commercial insurance, retirement and retirement financing, disposable income, if we only count this into the third pillar, then the third pillar is too light, is too small in scale and share. So the reason for this phenomenon is because the concept of the third pillar, the content, the logic, and the structure of the third pillar, we have equated it with this commercialized, marketized fourth pillar. And it is not based on the third pillar, which should truly be the IRA. Now, in semantics, we call it individual account. But again, it is different from the international concept of international retirement account. We know that for retirement provision, the first pillar, it is earlier in its construction than the third pillar. But for the first pillar, it was really payment, immediate payment. But for the third pillar, where there is IRA, there is going to be a management and accumulation of the retirement fund for the third pillar. Since it is accumulated, then it is only at retirement, the point of retirement, then you will activate the retirement fund for use after retirement. So it involves the accumulated fund that you have deposited yourself and your investment returns. Now, because it is accumulated for the third pillar, so it also includes the historical changes in the capital markets over the time. So after a few decades, if you activate your retirement fund, then of course it will involve a long-term management of the fund. And it would involve expert or professional custodian, professional investors to do the investment according to the market mechanism. So there will be equity investment. So in the investment in the equity market, there is a third pillar involvement as well, especially for PE, VC, and angel investment in the early stage of investments. Because of this long-term funding of the third pillar, so there are these venture capital investments, and that is the history, the accumulated funds. for long-term investments and long-term investment funds managers, they become part of the history and the logic of this part of the retirement fund market. So it reflects the deep historical logic of the market. So if we look at this historical logic, we see three things. First of all, if individual accounts are IRAs, it should be an accumulated system. With longer years of working, there will be more accumulation. And this accumulated system will bring on a effective investment. So how do we accumulate into a specific account? For other accounts, they have other logic. And only when the accumulation is put into a retirement account, only then will it satisfy the historical definition of such accounts. So for individual accumulation, does it mean that they randomly accumulate over the working years? Rather, in the third pillar of accounts, there is a tax concession or an exemption from individual income tax. That is to say, individual income tax had been taken off. It's exempted from this accumulated account. And therefore, for these specific accounts, it is part of the logic of these accumulated accounts, and the exemption of income tax is part of the logic of these accumulated accounts. And another point is because the funds within these accounts can be put into any investment sector, and in investment, there will be a deferred tax, and that is the concurrent year of investment income will not have tax levied on it. So there is a deferred tax effect. But of course, in review, the entire returns on the investment at the point of exit, there will be the tax applicable. So that is a third point. That is in the whole cycle of investment. There is a deferral of tax levied on the returns of investment. So the accounts minus the tax exemption and also the deferred tax, the result is the IRA that we know it. So this is the theory of and the logic of IRA. Now, what is the actual situation? The third pillar, and put together, when it is put together with the first pillar, there are a logic. Now, for instance, the existing user of the funds is current in the sense that the account is for, there is a liquidity and there is a compensation for the payment from the fund. Now, if the demographics is young population, working population, how would it be the first pillar or the third pillar? Because there would be no one taking the pillar one accounts, which is present pay and present pay in and pay out. So this is a reason why for the first pillar and the third pillar, we have put the individual accounts under the same logic, and that is the accumulated logic, because we could not see into the future. 2013, 2014, the first pillar, those paying and those taking funds out of the account had reached a balance point. After that, the balance had been tipped. Every year, for first pillar accounts, if there are more taking out funds and there is a less amount of people working, that is, employment number is lower, then there is no accumulation. The balance is in negative territory. When there is no accumulation function, then the third pillar with accumulation function will be utilized. So pillar 1 plus pillar 3 accounts, there was a balance of 5 to 6 trillion, and this would be third pillar account funds. For 2013, 2014, as it has already struck balance, and after that, we will use the pool for the balance of third pillar accounts to subsidize to reach the balance point. So the third pillar accumulated funds will be used for first pillar accounts, which is current pay-in, current take-out of funds. So that would be borrowing from the third pillar. And then there are a few theoretical bases, and which is befitting of the Chinese scenario. First of all, retirement fund is a social service. Now, if it is all social service and also social funds and social management, then why the third pillar IRA should be exempted from income tax? So with the personal asset investment income, because the society wants to encourage this kind of activity, and that was why there is a personal income tax exemption. For the funds and the accounts investment, there is also a deferral tax. So this is social support. This is social nurturing for this special tax exemption or policy applicable to these accounts. So this is public funds accumulation, public retirement, third pillar. It is a subsidization of public to individual retirement. So with all these theories, we have come to a conclusion. In our discussion, in a lot of papers or academic papers, from the existing accounts to invest into securities and financial products, it is considered third pillar funds. For this calculation, it satisfies deferral tax requirements, but it is not the total scenario tax deferral arrangement. It is only in the investment of financial products. So the classic third pillar should be after-tax exemption. That should be the concept and logic. And if we adopt that logic and concept for individual accounts, it should be the main source for third pillar, the main component of third pillar, and the main support of third pillar. And if that is the case, the structure of third pillar will be different from the I call this a fourth pillar. I wanted to call it a fourth pillar, and then there is a fifth pillar. The fifth pillar is full society supporting of voluntary retirement fund. That would be the fifth pillar. And the fourth pillar would be in disposable income using investment to invest in retirement services and enjoy a tax deferral, and we call this the fourth pillar. So this is the different concepts. In our statistical collection in the past, because every year, every month, how much is accumulated, what is the income, the individuals are not concerned enough about them for the third pillar accounts. And therefore, there had not been any fundamental understanding of the operation and the performance of these third pillar accounts. That's why we have to look at the logic and concept of its construction. The IRA in the third pillar should really enjoy the tax exemption and the tax deferral, and only then, and also with individual concern for such accounts and the investments therein, should this be the classic third pillar. So this is the logic and the theoretical concept for all these ideas. Now that we are clear on the names and the concepts, next, let us look at the logic of the third pillar. It is about long-term development and also investment and on accumulated basis. So let us look at some of the scenarios and calculations. The first one, the first scenario and calculation is as follows. As I have mentioned, where the population is young, more are paying in, less are taking out from the retirement fund. In this scenario, the retirement fund, it is in a bonus period, and the accumulated funds can be used to make investments, because only with investments will there be more returns. So it is continuously accumulating its balance. However, today, when this kind of pay in and pay out concurrently is not sustainable, then the original accumulated system had been used on the concurrent pay in, pay out system. So that is to say, it has usurped, the former had usurped the latter. So the first pillar calculation had been used for third pillar calculation. So in the first pillar, those who pay in are not able to satisfy the need, and therefore the third pillar will have to guarantee the meaning of accumulated measure. So accumulated, only with accumulation can there be support for third pillar balance and third pillar continuous accumulation. Only with accumulation can there be effective investment. This 5 trillion is the accumulated amount for the third pillar. In the past decades, 30 years, 40 years, if we have put the investments into the securities market, the returns was as such. And if we invested into the property sector, its investment would be as such. And if we look at it that way, with time elapsing, the total amount would have increased significantly. So this is about the accumulation logic, the value of time, and also the accumulated measure. And another scenario and calculation is asset management. Now, if liquidity is guaranteed, and if it is liquidity for pay in and pay out concurrent, it is guaranteed, then right away there is a question, and that is, how do we manage these assets, these funds. In the long term, if every year we have 1 percentage point more of return, then over a period of time, how much more returns will we be able to get? And at retirement age, the accumulation would have increased the third pillar accounts, and there will be a lot more wealth. And only then will you be able to have accumulated sufficient wealth to support the retirement. And asset management would bring on investment, and the investment over time would support the result of increased amounts in the account stemming from investment returns. So that is capital appreciation, greatly increased. So let us look at the bonus from the capital markets and investment into it. Let's say in the past 20 to 30 years of annualized return from the infrastructure projects of 7% annual return. And if we invest in the long term, it would be over 7%. And for the past 30 years of securities market, it would be annualized at over 10% return. And if it is a global investment, we would be able to enjoy the global investment returns. If it's investing into China's PE in the past 20 years, it may be 25% annualized return. If in the secondary market, we use multi-asset structure to manage the funds, then with risk matching portfolio deployment, it would also be able to bring on stable income with risk management tools. So this is not just about professional asset management institutions, but it would also bring on a stable return from the market. So I talked about the VC, PE, and also the development over the past 20 years in China. It would have brought on certain investment returns. But if we make it global, if we invested in all the leader companies in the world in the different sectors, then it would be more than just 40% or returns. The annualized return would be very handsome, and the principal amount as it accumulates and as there is sound investment philosophy, the total fund would have grown significantly. The third scenario, with our present calculation for the third pillar, we may have 5 trillion. And also with the balance with deferred tax. And the fourth pillar is also calculated into the third pillar, then compared to the 10% that we have now, it would be increased to 30%. Even though the first pillar, as it transforms, guarantees the basics of retirement fund. And as long as the third pillar funds continue to grow, especially after investment, after asset management, it accumulates investment returns, then in the total amount growth and also the investment returns growth, there will be support for the third pillar. And in the end, it would increase the total income and the total amount of funds to cover the retirees in their needs. And also, we can provide a certain flexibility to the retirement system. What is the retirement age? If it is early retirement, then the accumulated tax-free proportion from third pillar would be less. If you retire late, it would be higher from the third pillar.
If the flexible retirement system and flexible asset system are combined, then more people will go for more accumulation and more return. They will defer retirement so that there would be stronger financial support for the tertiary pillar, for the third pillar. Now, let's say, based on IRA, if I have retired, I have still not used up what I've accumulated, then the third pillar and the first pillar, based on IRA, are very different because for the first pillar, it is under the society. The third pillar is under personal name. In other words, the first generation financial support is being put in the future generation system. Then perhaps among future children or among future grandchildren, then in different members of society, if there is this kind of transfer or accumulation arrangement, then scale of assets within the third pillar will become bigger, and return on investment will also become bigger. And in the future, I think the overall asset scale will continue to grow. There will be long-term prosperity. So, okay, for the third pillar, I think we can actually focus on investment management of the assets. And then we can make use of the most professional investment management method to do it. So for all these methods, the third pillar will be allowed to accumulate. There will be good rates of return on investment. And then the investment term will be longer. The third pillar will play a bigger role in the investment market. It can even cross generations. There will be more flexibility in people's retirement age. And then under the third pillar logic, then I think there will be a stronger system. And this can support sustainable development. There will be quality, scale, financial guarantee, and so on for the overall retirement system. Next part. Back to the IRA management. There are a few external social welfare dimension enhancement. First of all, when it comes to choice of assets and time frame, as said just now, if we deduct income tax, personal income tax, then I think the overall scale can grow further. So there may be more people within the account whose personal income tax can be deducted and so on. So now I would like to talk about another factor. When it comes to attributable assets types, and if there are more types, for example, new VC investment into the new economy, high-end manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and so on. Then on the equity end, there will be new industries, new products, new markets, and new services. As a result, level of employment will increase. There would be more choice of different asset types and more return on assets. And overall return on factors of production will also go up. So for the third pillar, there is not only this external element in terms of time, there are also asset types, asset management, and more choice. Total return on factors of production will also increase significantly. Okay, if we deduct personal income tax or exclude personal income tax, is it true that there would be a loss of tax revenue? I think this is a big misconception. If all the accumulation goes into the market, then there would be a huge amount of funds into the financial market. And then the financial market will support the real economy. Let's say you buy equity in growth companies, or you invest into the PE, you invest more into the assets and their bonds, then behind the scene, there would be support for the whole society's real economy. Employment rates will go up, enterprises will grow faster, there would be supply of successful factors of production, there would be full employment. And as a result, the overall tax base can expand. And then back to the pension discussion. So financial support will be bigger, and there will be demand from pension. And in the market, there would be a lot of shopping and spending, and then sales tax will also increase tax revenue. So in this way, the tax base will grow bigger, and then there will be increase in tax revenue. That's because enterprises are successful, they grow faster, and at the same time that boosts consumption. I think that is the external logic. So today, right now, for all the enterprises, if you look at tax rate, well, there is pressure on these enterprises. How can we try to reduce fees? When it comes to the logic of reducing fee, let's say if 8% of total salary, let's say if the fee is not needed, if no fee is payable, then, well, in the past we put in a lot of effort. However, we had not reached a reduction of 10% at all. So I just want to put that back into the tax portion. So enterprises disperse salary to their employees. That part won't change. But then people will enjoy higher disposable income, especially for SMEs. For SMEs, employees only want more cash payment. So as a result, there will be this historical logic. The logic of tax cut on the surface seems like a cut in tax revenue, but then disposable income will increase. Part of disposable income will stay in the personal account of pension, and that would give future support. It will support future growth. So this is the logic of tax cut. Okay, tax revenue doesn't increase, and personal disposable income does not decrease. Enterprises do not face any increase in fee or taxes. So that is about the external factor. Today, let's say if the balance of 5 odd trillion goes back to personal accounts, then the payment for that year is not enough to pay the retirees of that year, then that would be a hidden debt. For hidden debt, let's say we make use of state-owned assets operation as a logic. So we use that to serve the purpose. Today, if we look at state-owned assets and state-owned capital, well, state-owned assets will be used to form different operating companies for pension. And then the revenue or the yield can be used to offset the shortfall. So the SOE reform and also mixed ownership reform also have to do with the operation right of state-owned assets. Management companies of state-owned assets at the end of the day will also be market-oriented. So that is the logic about externality. Finally, I have 1 more minute. I will talk about Social Security Fund. I will share with you a few points of logic to verify the analysis just now. For Social Security, the main revenue comes from the secondary market, 30-odd%. And then there is also direct investment of 20% in the primary market, and then there is PE 10%. So the return from equity investment increases return of annualized return of 8.6% in the past. I think Social Security has to do with reserve for future pension. If we talk about the third pillar, personal account, well, that is actually the logic about accumulation. And then for Social Security fund, it is managed in the same way as the parent fund. I only work on IOP and also asset allocation. So actually, the logic is in the form of fund management. Management fees will come down. When Social Security fund no longer works on GP but only LP, then in terms of asset allocation, choice of trustee, choice of fund manager, and also beneficiaries, we are only the first layer trustee. The first layer trustee also has to interact with other custodians, the most professional organizations in the market. And actually, because of the accumulation system of the pension system, there will be multiple asset allocation, and market-oriented fund managers, custodians, trustees, and service providers can all grow together. So I think for Social Security fund practice, I think this has led to the third pillar accumulation system. And we are talking about sustainable finance and future high-quality development. It must be backed by this historical logic, investment logic, and accumulation logic, and growth logic. That's all from me. Thank you.
谢谢王老师精彩的演。
Thank you, Mr. Wang, for the excellent presentation. Your presentation is very detailed. You talked about sustainability of Social Security Fund. But my question for you is, this question may not be related to Social Security. China is a huge country. So let's say if we're talking about 6 trillion, this is about the urban population. But for the agricultural villages, there are so many elderly people in the villages. Is there any arrangement for them from the government? If you look at the whole China Social Security system management, in agricultural villages, we have the agricultural insurance system, but then the size or scale of funds and also management system are not as big as that for the urban employees. But there is a very important recommendation. In the process of building this agricultural insurance, we do not only look at the payments that are made right now or the existing users. We have to look at accumulation among the agricultural villages, and there must be a system safeguard so that there would be final satisfaction of this sustainability need. So I think we have to look at the structural accumulation portion of the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Wang. Because of time, I only asked one question. Now let's move on to the next session.